Hi everyone, welcome to another daily devotional video. So today I'm going to be reading a passage from the Bible that's hopefully very familiar. It's a story of Jesus calming the storm with the disciples in the boat. It's from Matthew, and so we're going to just dive into it. I've got 5 points to cover that hopefully will be a real benefit and bless you today. So let's dive into the word and let's read from Matthew chapter 8, verse 23 to 27. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O ye of little faith?" Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marvelled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" So you could look at this story and just say, well, Jesus got into a boat, there was a storm, the disciples got scared, and he calmed everything down. But actually, if you just take that approach, then you miss some of the real detail in it that I want to explore and expand, and hopefully will really make you think and be blessed and encouraged. So the first thing I thought about when looking at this passage was the fact that the disciples followed Jesus. Jesus got into the boat and they got in with him. Jesus didn't say, let's get into a boat together and sail out into the sea and let's go into a big storm and drown. This wasn't the point of the trip. He was going somewhere. He was on a destination. And as we read later on in the book of Matthew, we see actually that Jesus sailed to the other side. And when he got there, he met two men who were demon possessed, and he delivered them from that and he saved them. So he was on a journey to save souls, and the disciples went with him. So really from this, I take that actually if we follow Jesus, we're on a mission with him to save souls. And yes, there may be some storms on the way, but actually the ultimate journey is on a mission journey. So I don't believe Jesus took them out into the sea to die. He knew that actually this isn't what he came to do. This wasn't how he was meant to die. He knew his destiny was about dying on the cross, not in a boat in the middle of the ocean. But his perspective was different to that of the disciples. And so, like when we come to Jesus with the storms in our life, his perspective is different to ours. The second point I'd like to make is that actually, even though they were followers of Jesus, and as we are followers of Jesus, we will go through storms. Now, that may not feel that encouraging, but it can be encouraging because we can look back to the people that followed Jesus and were with him all the time, and yet they still encountered difficulty. We know that we go through storms, but we also know, just like in this story here, that Jesus can bring us peace. The third thing I was thinking about is not to panic or worry if Jesus is silent in our lives. In the story, Jesus was asleep. He was out of sight. He couldn't be seen by the disciples, and yet he was still ultimately in control of the situation. So my take on that is, don't worry. Jesus is still in the boat with you, even if it feels like he's not present with you and you can't see him. I know I'd certainly prefer to have a sleepy Jesus in my boat rather than no Jesus at all. So please don't worry. He will never desert you. He is absolutely right beside you. Jesus does care about your problems. But maybe he just knows that they're not going to sink the boat. And therefore, maybe that's why sometimes he may not seem as worried. He doesn't seem as worried because he doesn't worry, obviously. But in terms of our perspective on things can be different to his. The disciples cried out for help. So although they were in a sense of real panic And I know I've heard it said before that these guys were burly fishermen that were used to being out on boats, not like me when I go out on a pedalo when we go on holiday and get a bit worried when it starts getting a bit choppy and getting nervous looks from Naomi from the shoreline about whether or not I should come in. These guys are absolutely used to these kind of conditions, but they must have been really scared for them to have panicked and gone to see Jesus. But even in their midst of panic, they still knew they had to go to Jesus. And so just like us, there is no point worrying. Actually, in that period when you're worrying and you're panicking, go to Jesus. That is the time when we have to call upon him, when we have to pray. Worrying doesn't do anything, but praying does. It doesn't always mean you get what you want, but we know that when you pray, God will give you what you need. And then the last point about learning to look back. The disciples, once Jesus had calmed the storm, said, and it says in the passage, they marvelled. They were like struck, wow, who is this guy? And so really for me, it's a point that to remember that when things are calm, when Jesus gives you peace, to look back. And maybe particularly at this time when things are challenging and you're finding maybe things hard, I really would encourage you to look back at the many times in your life when Jesus has given you peace, when he has intervened in the storms of your life. And I really believe in doing that, it will be a real faith builder. I feel that relief from the storm is not the best thing that can happen to you. Actually, the best thing that can happen to us is for us to be made more and more into the image of God, into Jesus, in the image of Jesus Christ. The enemy can use storms to grow your feelings of anxious, afraid, being hurt and discouraged. But actually God can use these storms to make you fearless, to make you sure and steadfast. So really do think back of those times in your life when Jesus has calmed the storms in your life. Jesus did it 2,000 years ago. He absolutely can still do it and does still do it today. You can experience peace just like the disciples did. Storms are frightening. Let's be really clear about that. But the storm is not where you face the enemy. The storm is where you meet with Jesus. I hope that gave you some encouragement today. I hope you enjoy reading that passage over again. As much it's very much a familiar story, I hope there are some new truths in there that have caused you to think and be excited about what Jesus can do in your life. And thank you for listening, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care.